Hello, hopefully you can hear me quite clearly. This is Noir Nerd and this is going to be a video. It's going to be like a 20-minute long video really, where I just talk about this software project I've been working on for quite a long time called Papyrus3D, which started off as this idea to create a system, end-to-end system for creating 3D interactive experiences with A-frame, with a mapping tool, map editor and dialogue system, basically for creating 3D adventure games, right? So you have a map editor and all this sort of stuff. Now, this project, a side project, which has been my main side project for a year and a half now, I think, has bloomed. It's gone through several different iterations and frustrations, and those still remain, to be honest. If I was going to redesign the whole thing, I'd probably do it again in somewhat of a different way. It's very the code base is somewhat bloated, but I'm reaching a stage now where I've got a bit of spare time, so I do want to just finish it off. So the video you're seeing now is essentially like just me working in real time. I'm trying to nail a few things like the dialogue, trying to work on the alternate interfaces. Obviously it looks very janky. That's like often when you are midway through doing things, it will look very janky, and WebXR Dev is no exception in that case. And I'm not going to just be describing what I'm talking about. I want it to be more of just like a reflective vlog, basically, where I think in real time about like what I like about this project and really about the loose ends I want to tie off now, and just some things I actually want to scale back as well. So I think I wasted a lot of time in the last time I was working on this a lot with trying to create enemy AI, an enemy patrol system, and that just ended up, I got like a half working thing working, but it was nowhere near the level where I was happy with it, and it was jank incarnate really. So at the minute I'm really trying to scale it all down. I need to get the core things working, like dialogues of choice, because that is, after all, one of the main features of any interactive fiction game, and in 3D it's no different. So I've been trying to do that for the last few days with varying results, and it is starting to get somewhere. As you can probably see from the code, there's just so much bloat that I do have utility functions, which is good. So utility functions, if you're not aware, are like reusable functions that do the same thing. You can just often developers will create utilities script that they can just refer to in other parts of the code. So you've got like reusable utility functions that you can reuse. So I have refactored it somewhat to implement more of that, but there is still quite a lot of refactoring I've been doing just to scale things back, remove unnecessary redundancies, and that's still an ongoing process really. I mean, what you see me doing right now at this point is, like I say, is experimenting with a test HTML page to just try and get this dialogue system looking right. I actually did end up redesigning quite a lot of this, but it does show you in a very clear way that often with development it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or vice versa. That's very much part of it. Often you want to see, does this work, does this look good, what exactly do I want it to do? The choice buttons are still something I'm struggling with a bit, but mostly it's just a case of revisiting that code and just getting a system that works. One of the difficult things with creating a framework for a game engine, well, in this case I'm working with a pre-existing system in A-frame, and I'm creating a framework to try and make it easier to do one thing with it, is that it's very easy for it to explode, which it has done in a lot of ways here. Like even that HTML file that I've currently got up, like I need to scale a lot of it down in terms of the asset loading that's happening. I also encountered this really weird bug, which I did find out the reason for this later, where it's just spawning in. So like a bunch of things seem to have randomly just broken since the last time, and it was a long time since the last time I looked at this project. So I did spend quite a lot of time just fixing things up, basically taking out redundant stuff, cleaning up, removing unused variables, that sort of thing. and I want to be quite ruthless with it now. Basically, I want to get this thing done in the next 2 months at least. I've got like a good base, like the map editor works fairly well, the actual game loop itself functions more or less, so like level loading works, exiting works. One thing I think is I'm going to struggle with, and probably will remain like a more of a expanded feature list and upcoming after I've got that first working version done, is obviously in IF you want like a lot of events to trigger based on certain things, and it's how do you translate that from JSON so that it actually works in the framework. So like for interactions it's already working, like you can look at prefabs and an interaction will happen which will present you some text, but maybe you want that to trigger a game event, right? How do I control that? How do I get that working in JSON? The whole project as a whole is essentially a template so that when it's finished you will have a ready-made template that you can modify to your, and and you'll be more or less happy that it works. It just takes out a lot of the hard work of obviously having to do what I'm doing here, which is code it all from scratch. That's what most frameworks do, really, or libraries as well. They take away they just hide a lot of the abstraction from you. But the hardest part with this I've found, which is it's like somewhere in between creating a framework and an engine from scratch, is scaling that specification down so it doesn't become too broad. And that's definitely something I've struggled with this project. Is I have gone off on tangents, and those tangents have cost me in terms of the development time. And yeah, like I said, I just want to get it looking halfway decent. I want to get it so it's anybody who knows how to edit JSON files can just get into this, replace with their own assets, and create a fully working game from end to end. But yeah, there's just so many different loose ends that you have to tie off. That one of the other things that side effects definitely comes up with doing this sort of work. So it's like, how do you avoid some changes you make in one part of the system from knocking out or affecting other parts? And that's a really, really hard balance to keep, which is again why I'm scaling it down overall in terms of what it can do, because then I think that helps with just making it easier for me myself to manage, but also it ends up with something that's less buggy ideally. So like a lot of what you can see put on screen now is the again the dialogue. I want to really just like get an easy to use interface that makes sense, isn't too obstructive to gameplay. So spend a lot of time doing that, and it's a mixture of you have like a predefined dialogue box in the actual HTML, and then you have elements that are appended via JavaScript based on certain events that occur. I've spent a lot of time talking, so I'll take a little bit of a rest and let you just watch it, I suppose. Like I've said in a lot of previous vlogs as well on this subject, like I find the inspector in A-Frames an invaluable tool just for prototyping UI, prototyping. You access it with Control Alt and I, and it's an invaluable tool definitely in any A-Frame developer's arsenal, because you can just see how things would look if you resize, scale it down, move positions, that sort of thing. I came up with this idea, which I've implemented now, of creating like titles. So per interaction, you get like the actual item you're interacting with is separated from the text that it produces or spits or outputs. And yeah, that was relatively painless. Just a lot of fiddling really with scaling and positioning. Not been hard tested that much, but again, like I'll worry about that later. I'll get the basics working first. Then I'll go on to the edge cases, which I think in general is a good philosophy when you're coding anything. You don't want to like. You need to get something. The main thing I think often with developing any type of system, whether it be a website, web application, CRUD app, a game like this is, or something else, is you want to concentrate on the minimum viable build, and then once you've done that, then you can build from there. And like. Obviously, because I'm working in this in isolation, it's been trying because I've had to really like try and juggle many different things with whilst also spinning something on my head, which is a difficult process to get used to. It's definitely, that's why I started this project though, because it's a challenge, and it's it's a good thing as a developer to really get out of your comfort zone. Like, I'm already familiar with the technology, but how do I get it to do something that I think is really exciting but also difficult? And it's easy to lose momentum on that sort of thing, right? I have various points of lost momentum on this. I tend to be having spurts of activity with it, so like I've really found like my interest in it again recently, but maintaining that interest for a year and a half, it's been quite difficult. And yeah, like various times life just takes over, right? I mean, this happens with a lot of open source projects. Life does take over. You've got to pay your bills, you've got to work, you've got to do all the things that normal people do to make money and to live. But yeah, like I'm like a lot of the core functionalities here now. Like, I don't really show the map editor in this, but that more or less with a few quirks is working, which is good. And yeah. One thing I'd say for anyone watching this who is wanting to do something similar to this is just don't underestimate the complexity of what you're having to do. You are, I've been following a lot of people who do game engine coding, and you do have to realise that you will gain many useful skills in the process of doing that, but you might not really end up with something what you originally envisioned at the start of that process, right? And it is a process. You're embarking on a journey whenever you take on a huge project like this, which is again why so many of these projects never really are fully realised. And invariably, by the time I've created this, like I have managed to get, like, for example, the Papyrus core code was up there. That's now down to about, I think, 500 lines. I've simplified, stripped things out. The component code is, again, so in total there's probably about 1,800 lines of JavaScript, so it's not ridiculous. Like, you see that, yeah, it's probably about 800 actually, I'm looking at it now. But like I said, refactoring at this point is somewhat necessary. There are parts of the code as well, like, which are a bit confusing. The central core loop for the adding different elements based on the array elements is probably the main one, and it is a little bit of a annoyance to have to do things in there, because you can get unprecedented side effects if you accidentally knock something out. So again, the scope of this thing is quite big, especially for a solo dev to handle on your own. You'd usually, on a project like this, if you're working with frameworks or game engines especially, you are, without wanting to repeat myself, you are balancing a lot of different considerations: optimization, the actual features themselves. The complexity is difficult to manage, but it is definitely worthwhile, and I would recommend any developers who do really want to get into something that's quite niche and interesting to explore these sorts of fields. Like, you'll find online actually there's a lot of developers doing really interesting stuff, obviously with higher level programming languages like C++, which obviously lends itself very well to game dev systems, is the standard one really. Like, what I'm doing here really is quite unusual in terms of making something that's web-based and is coded in JavaScript, and yeah, as you can probably imagine, comes with its own set of problems, right? Obviously, like, using A-Frame and under the hood 3JS is dealing with a lot of the 3D WebGL complexity that you'd otherwise have to deal with, which is good, but there's still a lot of balancing to do, especially when you're dealing with 3D graphics, because performance dropping is a big issue, and something I'm dealing with still. Like, on this initial scene that loads, it can be quite frustrating sometimes if the frame rates can drop, and that's something I'll just have to carry on trying to optimize as I go on. But yeah, my main concentration is just getting something that works and that people can start using. And once I've got to that stage, I'll be a happy man, and I can probably rest, and then Well, this is an MIT-based project, so obviously if someone wants to pick it up, code it, do a pull request, fixes, then you're free to do that. It's a GNU licensed project, so it's a not-for-profit profit stuff project really. It's just something, again, repeating myself a bit, but I've done it as a passion project and as a self-learning exercise. Yeah. Let me just try and think about what would I do differently if I was going to do this again now from scratch, based on everything I've learned from. I would definitely scope down the initial ambitions of it. I would make it more focused. I would concentrate on the core loops. So, for example, the interactions and triggering interactions, because, like I said before, I got lost on like developing AI systems, walking patterns, animations, and their animations are implemented. You can even see the guy who's like got an idol. It's like a sort of Walter White guy, and he does have a idle animation. You can apply. You can play different animations if you want. But I think, yeah. Really, for now, I'm just going to create it so that you can add in characters, you can interact with them. Certain dialogue options will trigger world events or game events is one of the major things I need to implement. And then once I've done that, I'll be bloody happy, because then I'll have it so that you can actually use it, create it like a traditional IF, except with implementing 3D, which I think will be a big achievement, and I think does have some scope for people to use out there in the wild. I think, like I mentioned before, this also does export out, so you can export builds to any executable. So it'd be exciting to see if once I get this finished and polished enough, people creating their own games with the template system by modifying the JSON, creating their own maps, and then eventually creating their own games, which would be like, I would consider it a success if, once this is nicely refined and it actually works and more or less bug-free, that I start seeing people creating actual games with it and seeing where the creativity can go once it's handed over to people who'd actually do stuff with it, right? I think, like I've basically explained this before in other videos, but it's all powered by JSON files, really. So you had the dialogues with JSON, you had the interactions with JSON, you had the prefabs with JSON. Obviously, you have to have the actual asset files in there too, but you can have models with JSON, GLB or OBJ. I think it supports both. You can change colors and that sort of thing. You can do all sorts of stuff, really. There's water, it supports water in the map editor. You can do different customizable wall sizes. You can add water where you want. You can add doors that move and open and close. You can add key doors. All that stuff more or less works. Like if you pick up a blue key, you can pick it up, then you can open the blue door. You get a little message saying that it's been opened. But again, I'm getting rid of the idea of implementing combat and implementing enemy AI, because I just don't have that much time in my life to get it working. One of the major frustrations I've actually had is A-frame and physics systems seems really, really, really badly implemented at present. I've tried using Canon.js, I've tried using Ammo.js, I've tried using physics system A-frame component, and none of it I can really get working properly. And now this is a bit of a disappointment, because I wanted to implement, it's currently got a gaze-based movement system, so you look at the floor and then you move. But I wanted also to implement a WSAD, and in future I am going to try and get that done. But for now I'm just like discounting it, because it comes with its own set of frustrations, which is primarily the making it so that you can have a dynamic controller as the player that doesn't walk through walls, and that's been a real pain. And at various points I've gone off on tangents trying to get that to work properly, and it's been a bit of a frustration, to say the least. I'm not sure if this is ever really getting fixed. It seems like A-frame's just a bit behind. In fact, in all honesty, if I was going to build this from scratch again, I would probably go with Three.js, which is more technically complex, but in the long run, once I've got a rendering pipeline working with Three.js and I can render things, would probably be better overall, I think. Like, A-frame has the benefit in some respects of being simpler, because you in some ways, but it just becomes it's got like a limit of use, basically. So once it gets to a certain point, you are limited in some respects by the library. Now, I'm not here to shit on A-frame. A-frame is it's really good for many types of apps. It's actually really good. It's pretty simple to get set up and running. Like you could even create some A-frame experiences purely just with HTML, not even having to write in JavaScript. But for something like this, which is a bit more bigger, like Three.js would certainly probably be more well suited, I think. I know, even though A-frame is basically Three.js anyway under the hood, but yeah. Oh yeah, I'm also using ChatGPT a bit, so I'll talk a bit about how I'm using AI. So I use Copilot within Visual Studio, but I don't use it a great deal. Mostly that's just used for some boilerplate occasionally. Sometimes if I'm really stuck on something, I'll prompt ChatGPT and see what it comes up with and then try and implement its solutions. But as you see here, it did not really work. I tried prompting it 3 or 4 times for a different physics solution, and it really none of it was working. I tried 4 or 5 different methods from prompting, and yeah, in some ways it does make it a bit more annoying because you have to really like make sure that you don't over-engineer or introduce bugs by accident by doing that. And it can also, yeah, I mean, you have to do more refactoring and go back and, oh dear, that random thing caught me out because I was trying that out and I forgot. But that's a me problem really more than anything else. That's what I'd say, intelligent use of AI. Like, as a developer, you've got to make sure you use it intelligently and not over rely on it. I think that's very important. I'll wrap this up here. I've talked for 20 minutes and I hope any of it was interesting. It's more of a perspectives on trying out a project like this and seeing what happens. It's always been like just my big experimental project that it's just a bit mental in a lot of respects. But it is getting close to something usable. It looks really jank here, obviously, because I'm just trying out loads of weird prototypal code things, and but it will eventually be finished. Like I say, I'm going to aim for 2 or 3 months, try and get the simple version working, and then we might have something usable for you all. Alright, I'll leave it there. I've been Noir Nerd. Like and subscribe, obviously, if you like watching somebody working on software projects and game projects. For the last year, I've been concentrating a lot on game dev, but I'm also doing a few bits and bobs of tutorials on mostly JavaScript libraries at the minute, which are quite interesting, which you can do all sorts of creative coding projects with, and I'll probably do more of those in the upcoming future. If you have any ideas for a tutorial you'd like to see, let me know. Right, I think I'll wrap it up there. Have a good evening and day, and yeah, peace.